Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Campus Watch. Today I have a really interesting story and a senior campus correspondent for campus reform and Youngstown State University student, Austin Browne, to bring it to us. So at Youngstown State University, Austin, you interviewed someone, a student who happened to be very pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas, it looks like. But for those who don't know too much about the story and don't know all about her beating around the bush and not answering your questions properly, can you provide a brief overview of what's going on here? Your interview got a lot of attention around the media already, but for those who have not been made aware of this interview yet, can you provide a brief overview, breakdown? What's going on here?
Sure. So we recently got a new group on our campus just after the Hamas attacks against Israel. The group is called Students for Justice in Palestine at Youngstown State University. And I'd been following their account, checking out what type of things they've been up to on campus. And I noticed that they were going to be having a rock painting event, which for people that are outside of Youngstown, they might not know about our rock, but it's basically a school spirit rock in the center of campus where a lot of student groups will take it upon themselves to go paint advertisements for events or different topics that they're passionate about. They'll paint on the rock. So what this group was doing was painting a pro-Palestinian message on the rock. So I went up to them as they were doing this, asked if I could interview their president just to get a sense of what the organization is all about. And through my interaction with her, I found that no matter how many times I asked her the question, she was completely unwilling to condemn Hamas and its terrorist actions against citizens of Israel, which is obviously shocking. But yeah, it was quite surprising to see something like that take form on the campus in such a short period of time after a terrorist attack like that.
So what were some of these questions that you were asking that she didn't seem to be answering, that she seemed to be, dancing around the bush and beating around the bush? What were some of these questions?
Very bluntly, I asked, are you willing to condemn Hamas as a terrorist organization? And the response that I received was, why should I condemn anything? She said that she would be willing to condemn violence, but she fell short of actually giving a condemnation of Hamas as a terrorist group. Another thing that I noticed was when we were discussing Israel and Palestine and Hamas and all of these things, she accused me of equating Israel and Hamas as being on equal footing because in her view, she says that Israel is actually a military force while Hamas is not. Clearly, this is not true. Hamas is a militant organization, and I explained that difference to her, but she seemed very unwilling to actually accept that.
Austin, here at Campus Reform, as you know, we've been covering a lot of anti-Semitism and pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas rallies and protests around college campuses. And they seem to indicate that anti-Semitism against Israel and anti-Israeli sentiments are already being propagated by, who knows what, faculty, or if it's just the environment on college campuses. Anti-Semitism seems to be running rampant on college campuses. And as a student journalist, can you comment on this? What other instances besides this interview and the stories that we've been doing here at Campus Reform, can you talk more about anti-Semitism that seems to be, running wildly unchecked across our American college campuses today?
Sure. Campus Reform recently ran a story about Stanford, where there was a professor there who actually rounded up the Jewish students in the classroom and told them to go stand in a certain section of the room and equated that to what he accused Israel of doing against the Palestinians. And then as he continued his lecture, he also equated Israel's actions with the Holocaust. So singling out students like that in a classroom on the basis of their identity is obviously just disgusting. But unfortunately, what we've seen is a lot of the students and the faculty and even administration be a lot more accepting of that type of hate. And especially for people, usually left-leaning people, who are very quick to call out what they view as hatefulness or bigotry and things of that nature. When real hatefulness and real bigotry actually come to pass at a university, they are completely unwilling to condemn it.
So a lot of universities seem to be remaining silent on this topic. Few of them have issued statements condemning Hamas and condemning the Hamas attacks on Israeli citizens on October 7th. While several of them have actually come out and condemned those attacks, a lot of them are choosing to remain silent, and more specifically, they're choosing to remain silent about their own student bodies that seem to be, siding with the Hamas and siding with the Palestinian attack against Israeli citizens. Now, why do you think that universities are remaining silent about their own student communities that are already sort of allying themselves in a way with the Hamas terrorist group? Why do you think that universities are remaining silent on this?
I think, in my experience, covering a lot of different topics pertaining to higher education and how the administrations are willing to deal with each case. Obviously, I've seen a lot of instances where students were harassed for being conservative, harassed for being, other belief systems. But one thing I have noticed is that they are very unwilling to call out any ideology that seems to align with the left. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here is a lot of people on the left taking the side of Palestine. Not to say that that is everyone, but a lot of left-leaning individuals have came out in support of Palestine and even Hamas in some cases. And I think that these universities are more willing to toe a fine line when it comes to condemning groups on the left, because they've seen how groups on the left act when they're called out, or when they are when another group acts in a certain way that they find detestable. They usually respond with violence. They respond with harassment and just acting out. And I don't think universities, quite frankly, want to have to deal with that.
Right. And now, honing in on one thing that you mentioned there, conservative students on college campuses. As a conservative journalist on a college campus, such as yourself and myself, what backlash have you received from leftist groups on college campuses, or administrators, or like-minded people such as that? Have you received any backlash or any criticisms for the kind of work you do as a conservative journalist, pointing out the pro-terrorism and pro-Hamas sentiments that are running wildly unchecked on university campuses?
Oh, certainly. I've been called just about every name in the book for being a conservative and a journalist. I make my opinions well known. I'm not afraid to share them. I don't push them down people's throats per se, but I am willing to share my opinion. And unfortunately, universities that used to be a exchange of ideas, a place, to exchange ideas, have become anything but that. So I've been attacked on the basis of me being a student government representative, and people have said that I should not be able to express my conservative opinions, and they've
Wow.
called me a racist, a bigot, every uncalled for name. Specifically with this case, with the interview with the pro-Palestinian organization, after my interview had concluded, the president walked off of the set of the interview and went and complained to the rest of the people that were present there. And it eventually turned into me arguing with the 15 or 20 people that were present. And they were accusing me of ignoring other problems in the situation and not giving a fair shake, despite the fact that, as the interview shows, my questions quite simply asked the student what her opinions, as well as the group's opinions, were on the matter, and if they were willing to condemn Hamas. And, clearly, as it was shown, they were unwilling to do that.
So, Austin, you were very courageous in that regard, to stand for your conservative beliefs and to conduct a good interview as a good conservative journalist should. You conducted a very powerful interview, and it started exposing the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism sentiments that are on our college campuses today. You were doing what a journalist should do, and you received backlash for that. Now, what would you tell students and other conservative student journalists on college campuses? What would you tell them? This is my favorite question that I like to ask. What would you tell other conservative students who are afraid of standing up for their beliefs on college campuses for fear of receiving backlash, or, getting into these 15, 20, 30 people versus one debates? What would you tell them?
My message would be simple in that regard, which is to never back down off of what you believe. I have had that belief since high school. My opinions were unpopular then. They're unpopular now, at least in the liberal schools that I've been a part of. And I don't really care. I express my opinion as it needs to be said. And I think that if you have an opinion and you're unwilling to back it and voice that to other people and defend it, then it's not an opinion worth having. I think that people need to, on college campuses especially, since they have become a complete monolith of thought. I think that as conservatives, we need to stand up, and especially as journalists who pursue the truth, to actually have a spine and stand up against these people who want to do anything but allow the truth to be said.
Certainly. A lot of journalists today have turned into the typical keyboard warriors, just fighting on the other side of the screen instead of trying to find the truth and expose the lies as you're doing here. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today. Good luck and keep doing what you do.
Thank you for having me.